sien, mens al die kerk het soos julle kerk gelyk. Dit op plek gelees het. So I'm going to speak in English, but my grip notes are in Afrikaans. And I must just tell you, maybe you might suspect that English is my first language, but I'm from the Free State. And yeah, so they say the national language of South Africa is broken English.
That's a good. Amen.
I once had to speak at a. Is wat gebeur as ek Engels praat? They say I once had to speak at an event there in Pretoria, and I thought it went pretty well. I gave it my best English, and one of our social workers were there, and she said afterwards, Jaco, it was okay, you know, wat paar keer het die mense gelag en so, and I thought, yeah, I get it. It wasn't that bad for a Vrystander. She said afterwards, Jaco, it was okay. She said, just next time, remember it's the Jews and the Gentiles, not the Jews and the genitals. So there's that. So I knew one thing when Heidi invited me, I knew that we're going to worship and it's going to be good. I think he's one of the most talented worship leaders in the country. He's Lars Heidi. Maar het is al lekker, het is special. Well, thanks for that. He said I must, so this session is still 10:30, is ek reg? 11:00, daarom. So he gave me 2 long sessions. Good luck to you all. And I thought, okay, then I'm going to talk to you about a very specific thing. We can maybe work it through. Normally what I'm going to try to compress now in these 2 sessions, we would do in 5 sessions. One about every habit. But we're going to try to do it in these 2 sessions. So it's Easter, and it's a good time to remember that Jesus is supposed to be in the center of Christianity. He's often not. He's often in the center of our songs, and in the center of our confessions of faith and of belydenisse, in the center of even our prayers and our talk. But he's not always in the center of our budgets, or in the center of our calendars, the places that really shows our priorities. And a lot of the discussions in the church and the arguments and so on, I believe it's because when Jesus is not in the center, if he's not the most important, then other things start to be more important, and then we talk a lot about the things that he never spoke about, spoke very little about, and the things that he talks a lot about kind of moves into the background. And every now and again, we as Christians must just say, let's just put Jesus again in the center. Let's measure everything on him. It's very quickly that something else becomes more important. And good stuff often. You know, evangelical theology can become more important than Jesus himself. Your theology can become even the Bible can become more important than Jesus. We've seen it, that people would pick a little Old Testament verse to justify violence or whatever. And you could just, hulle sê in Afrikaans, elke ketter het sy letter. I tell you, no matter what you want to do, you're going to get a verse for that. Yeah. I mean, if the Bible had an age restriction, it would be 2 to 18 if you would make a movie about it. There's wild sex and violence with massamoord. You can justify a lot of things, and you will pick a little verse for that, or being, selfish, or justifying yourself and being cruel. People have used the Bible to justify a lot of things. You know, the Germans, the Nazis, a lot of them. I mean, they were all. It was the hype of the Christian movement in Germany. People would go to the German theologians while the Nazis were rising. And a lot of those young people were fighting. They would write Bible verses on their tanks. And they would justify what they do. They'd say, yeah, but you know, this is the way God works with these people. But you can't do it with Jesus. So a lot of things comes right when the most important thing is the most important. And we just say Jesus first. The guy once was chiseling with a chisel and a hammer on a big stone, huge rock. His friend came by. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, I'm making a statue of a horse." His friend said, "That must be very difficult." He said, "No, it's very easy. You just cut away everything that doesn't look like a horse." And I thought when I heard that, maybe that's a good metaphor for discipleship. Discipleship is supposed to be about coming before God often, as we are this morning, saying, "Lord, we want to be more like Jesus. We want to, as a group, organize ourselves together, but also me personally." Dit is ons lekker om altyd sê die kerk is so, of die fout is daar. Maar jy is die kerk. But individually to say, "Lord, I want to be more like Jesus. Please cut away what is not like Jesus." And it's a very difficult thing. It's very difficult, the art of letting go. It's very painful for us to let go. Especially when things go tough, we rather like to grab on than to let go. And so what do we do? Rather than going through this painful process to say we want to be more like Jesus, we start creating us a Jesus that's more like us. Someone once said, I think it's Bernard Shaw, but some people say it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, of all people. He said, he looked at the Christians, he said, God created man in his image, and man, the gentleman he was, decided to return the favor. So when you catch yourself without noticing it often, we're starting to create ourselves a God that looks more like us. That's benefiting our group, our people, our way of life, our way of doing. That was the issue with the Pharisees. We're going to talk a lot about that. And I challenge you this morning to go read the 4 Gospels again. If it's too much to ask, just read Mark, at least, the oldest and the shortest Gospel. But it would be a good thing for every Christian, I think, to read the 4 Gospels, just raw as it is. And to let Jesus, the wild Jesus, they say we domesticated Jesus, to let the wild Jesus disturb you. I had a lunch with Stefan Hubert this week. He was my New Testament professor. And we spoke about it, that if we preach the gospel today, especially to the rich and the powerful, which we are, and it doesn't disturb us every now and again, most probably we're not telling the whole story. Don't be surprised if the gospel disturbs you. Disturb the disciples who left everything and followed Jesus. They were disturbed by some of the things Jesus said. So just know it beforehand. It's the right emotion sometimes om 'n bietjie ontstel te wees, om 'n bietjie te skrik as jy die evangelie lees. Want because Jesus was way freer than the religious people of his time. He freaked them out. It was his freedom that freaked them out. The stuck-up people were the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes. They always tried to put the fences and say who's in and who's out, and try to play it, us first and our religion and our group of people, our culture first. But Jesus walked across the fences of humans. Hy het oor die grense van mense geloop. En dit het hulle ontstel. Kyk al by die Samaritaanse vrou. So many of these stories, just Jesus, his freedom freaked them out. He did things that he wasn't supposed to do. But die tollenaars te gaan eet en al die ongiere karakters tussen hulle. Om 'n tollenaar en van sy disippels te maak. To go to the house of a leper or whatever, his freedom freaked them out. And it will freak us out also in our time, if we read the whole story. So go, and these things that I'm saying today, we're going to talk a lot of Jesus, a lot of Jesus today. I want you to go and test it. Don't take my word for it. You know, you can't one day say, Lord, you know, but maar daai ou met die lang hare en die skewe tande, hy het gesê. My pastor or my dominee said, you've got the Bible, you can go and test it. But I want to urge you, if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a Christian, to test it in the first place on Jesus. Go test it on what Jesus said, what he did, and go look at some lines. There's certain things that's emphasized in the four Gospels, and right through the Bible actually, especially in the New Testament, they would emphasize something in three ways. The first one is they would emphasize it by repeating it. Jy doen dit ook. As jy op vakansie gaan en die sleutel is iewers, iemand my kat kos gee, jou kind bly daar, seker moet maak met deure te wat ook al belangrike ding, dan sê hy, mamma, jy het dit al vir my vir die soveelste keer gesê. But that's how we emphasize something. You repeat it. So if you read the four Gospels, look, what's the trends? What's repeating over and over and over again? I want to also challenge you to, when you read the four Gospels, is to start with what you already understand and what you believe, what the things that you get, and move to the things that's difficult. So, because often, our ego is so strong, it looks for excuses just to justify us to continue doing what we're doing now. So, what happens often is you read the Gospels, and then you get something you don't understand. And then you use that as an excuse. You say, voordat ek nie hierdie ding verstaan nie, before I understand this, I can't continue. Hierdie ding pla my nou so, ek kan nie aangaan nie. Maar soos die ou wat een keer gesê het, dit is 'n goeie attitude, dink ek. Hy het gesê, die versies wat hom die meeste pla deesdae, is nie daai klomp wat hy nie verstaan nie, is daai paar wat hy verstaan. And we would lie to ourselves if we say that there's some things that we don't know. There's a lot of things that's repeated, Jesus makes it very clear what he wants. It might be difficult to do, but it's not that difficult to understand. So try to say, what are the things that I actually do understand? What are the basics? They say maturity is mastering the basics. So ons 'n rugby span hier gehad het, en die spannetjie eerste rugby span hier by die skool, hulle vaar sleg. Dan sien die eerste ding wat ons nie sê is nie, luister ouens, nou moet ons 'n skare doen en ons met allerlei ingewikkelde. Nee, wat sê ons vir hulle? Ons sê ons kom net weer by die basic uit. Kan julle dalk 'n bal raak vang? Agter te paas. Kan julle dalk ouens tackle? Kan ons die loskrams begin met, jy weet? And I think one of the reasons why in a country with so many churches, our effect is so little. If you looked at how small the early church was and how huge their effect was on the world, the effect of the church is on our country today, and there's a church on just about every corner. You know, we must be the country with the most peacemakers and the least peace in the world. And then the problem is not that there's these very complicated, difficult things we don't understand, that we don't have good theology, that we don't have good radio stations and books and academic institutions or whatever. The problem is that we don't live out the most basic essence of Christianity, daai heel basiese goed. That we don't live them out. So there was this, I once spoke at a youth event in Malmesbury in the Cape. I said to the kids, I said, sê nou jy is hierdie atleet, en jy drink, en ons steeds daar allerhande proteïen shakes en goed wat atlete drink, en jy weet, jy eet al die regte kosse, en die proteïen shakes, en jy drink dit en so. Maar dis al wat jy doen, jy sit net altyd by die huis, jy eet al die regte kos. Maar jy kom nooit op die veld nie, oefen nie, jy doen nie. Ek sê, wat sal gebeur, as so 'n kleerlingseentjie wat sy hand opsteek, hy sê, jy is opgeblaas raak. En ek dink, ja, dis wat sal gebeur, that's what would happen. If you eat the right food, but you don't do what it's supposed to help you doing, if you don't get into practice, the food will make you fat and slow, and what is lomp in Engels? Clumsy. Quite the opposite. Words that you do not compliment the athlete with. It will that protein shake is developed to bring out the best of you, but only when you get onto the field regularly. If you don't, it will do precisely the opposite. And I find it too often in a church that people are clumsy, they are slow, they have very little impact because they eat the good spiritual food, they're overfed in extremely good theologies, good spiritual food. Ons het al soveel keer in die kerk gewees en ons het al soveel goeie goeders beleef, but we are we're starved in living out even the most basic things that Jesus spoke about. So let me say something about my life. I live in this little, I don't know the best way to explain it, this hippie colony in Pretoria. So I'm with Echo Youth Development. We have these houses. In Pretoria we've got 5 houses there, and all very close together, and I live in a little flat there, attached to one of these houses, in the center of this community, in the hippie colony. And we try to do 2 things. For the last 24 years, I can't believe it goes this year 24. We try to rediscover something of the simplicity of the early church, and I'll tell you a few stories that we read about in Acts 2 and Acts 4. And we also try to help people in need by living with them. So we have high school kids that don't have a family. Die een ouetjie is geskort uit die verbeteringsskool om hulle idee te gee. Dis rowwe kinders. One of the first people that moved in years ago was just released from jail for murder. He was I think 20. So we have these high school houses because nobody wants to take them. And maybe between 11 and 13 cultures living together in our houses. And and then we have after-school houses called kids that's in orphanages when they, or shelters or whatever, when they exit school, they have no support system, and then they fall through the cracks and their kids end up again. So we have the weirdest people. The one guy was a kindersoldaat, a child soldier in the Congo, and a lot of Afrikaner but kindertjies in English, and we've got a family from Iran. They were Muslims, and they accepted the Lord Jesus there. And we've got just Zulus and Sothos and Xhosas and you name it, living together. And one of, let me tell you this story about eating the right food and not practicing it, not running it, not taking your faith, your good theology for a walk. There's a block of flats next to the church there, and we've got a house between the block of flats and the church, and there's a bunch of boys living in that in our block of flats. So daar's hierdie woonstelblok, dan is dit hierdie huisie, wat ons die klomp seuns daarin, en dan is dit die kerk. En daar's 'n tannie wat een keer, wel nie een keer nie, duisende kere, eerste keer, het sy kom mou oor iets. Ek weet, maar die huis is nou so rondom die kerk, 4 van die huise, so rondom die kerk, die ander een is 'n eind af. Sy stap sommer daarin, en dan sal sy vieslike woorde sê, en sy sal, ek weet, altyd mou, oor alles, hy het dit nie net oor ons huise nie, sommer oor enigiets. Hy het 'n keer gesê, someone once said she's got the ministry of discouragement. So sy baie moeilike tyd gekry. Dit was lank terug, so ek kan nou maar die storie vertel. So sy kom eendag op by my kantoor was daar, naby, en sy noem my nogal dome, nie gewoonlik, noem my sommer net Jakob. Maar sy is nog so formeel, sy kom al leer lang in die kerk. En sy is weer kwaad oor die kinders, en sy kyk, dis amper so half symbolies, sy bly daar in die woonstelblok, en sy kyk so af op hierdie huis, met die seuns wat daar bly, en sy sê, dominee, hier is hierdie 2 seuns, en is, jy weet, en dit ontstel haar verskriklik, wat hulle nou daar doen, en sy begin te keer oor dit, en ek dink, jene tannie, die 2 seuns waar die so man, jy weet, hulle is 2 Zimbabwese seuns, hulle is doof, so ek sekerlik nie geraas nie, hulle is wees, En hulle is nog vlugtelinge, hoe sleg kan dit gaan. En ek het nie 'n goeie dag nie, en sy sê, Dominee, dis 'n kerk hierdie, en hulle gedra hulle nie soos Christene. En voordat ek kan kry, toe sê ek, Tannie, ons moet dalk geduldig wees. Ek sê, jy weet, hierdie kinders is maar 3 maande hier. Ek sê, kyk hoe lank vat dit vir Tannie. Tannie is al hoeveel jaar? 70 jaar hier. Maar dat is Tannie nou gedra soos 'n Christen. Jy weet, Christen wees 101, dat ons nie veronderstel is om neer te kyk op mense wat swaar kry nie. Dat ons eerste go-to nie oordeel moet wees soos die Fariseërs nie. Dat ons moet vra, hoe kan ek omgee, hoe kan ek help, hoe kan ek lief hê? En toe dink ek, al daai kanselprogramme, al daai eredienste, al daai Bybelstudies, al die boeke, elke aand se stilte tyd, nou is 'n godsdienstige tyd. En Christen wees 101, die basics het verbygegaan. Jy sien, kyk, as jy die regte kos eet, maar jy oefen nie, en jy neem nie deel nie, dan maak daai regte kos, hou jy eintlik terug. Dit help jou nie. So 'n paar trends by Jesus wat 'n mens kry, as ons vra, wat herhaal? A few trends, sorry, if I start speaking Afrikaans, just bring me back with a wave. The one is that Jesus spoke more about how we should live. If you take the 4 Gospels as authorities, all we have, and then we have Paul's reflection in his letters on it. If you take the 4 Gospels, especially the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, then Jesus spoke much more about how we should live and what we should believe. Yes. So always when I was in Sunday school or in CSV camps and so on, they would say, yeah, the angels one day going to ask you, and you must answer the right words. And I think good theology is very important. But I think we should also know that Jesus did put a great emphasis, an enormous emphasis on living. And we'll get back to that, but at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, so as a community we would, once or twice we've read it for a month, every day we'd read, that's the core of Jesus' teaching, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And in an effort to try to put him in the center again. But when he ends it, when he gives his, he throws his whole heart out of there, he gives us his dream. And then it ends and it says, and you've got this passage about the house that was built on rock and the house that was built on stone. And then Jesus says the storms will come. You must know it. It's a given. Don't be surprised if storms come. And the big storm did come. The persecution of the early church and the fall of Jerusalem was just around the corner. Storms will come, and he says the house that will stand will be the one who listened, who heard, and did. Hy wat gehoor en gedoen het. Dis die verskil tussen die fondasie en die sand. The house that was on sand, somebody who heard, they acknowledged, they knew, but they didn't act. So hoor en doen is die fondasie, die doen deel. Gryp gee vir die fondasie om die storm stil te staan. And you will get that over and over again. Jesus didn't say, I was hungry, you prayed for me, I was thirsty, you did a sermon, you gave me a great sermon, I was a stranger, you had a theological debate about xenophobia, I was in jail, spoke about morality. He said, I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. And as far as you've done it for the least of these, you've done it for me. It's interessant altyd daai least of these. Ek dink altyd, ja, mens almal wil daai kinderhuis laaitjie wat uitstyg help. But the least of these. Ja. Dis maar die moeite. Awesome. Ek sê altyd ons jaag die hoërskoolkinders weg uit ons huis en ons wens partykeer hulle wil wegloop. Maak ons van ons kop af. The least of these. And he puts this emphasis on doing. Jesus tells the story of the 2 brothers. The one said the right thing. His father asked him something. The one said the right thing and he did nothing. The other one said the wrong thing, but he did the right thing. And then Jesus says, rather be like that second brother. Do the right thing. And Jesus says it, Paul also says it, the tree is known by its
Fruit.
Now he said theology. It's nice prayers. Now he says a tree is known by its fruit. It will be a physical thing. It's a tangible thing. A tree is known by its fruits. So there's this great emphasis on doing. So what I'm actually going to do with you is the 5 habits. It's this little book. I've got, I think, 2 or 3 of them there. I should have maybe bought more. But dis 'n reeks wat ek nou baie keer doen in Pinkstertyd. About 5 core things in the heart of the gospel. Things, habits that people would do. Things that people did. The early church did it. The church fathers did it. From Martin Luther to Martin Luther King, from St. Francis of Assisi to Mother Teresa, everybody that made a difference for the gospel, you'll see that they had these 5, and they got it from Jesus. You will see, as in the Gospels, these 5 habits are repeated over and over. But before we get to that, you will see that a lot of these things is about the art of letting go. In our world, it works like this. If you want to be successful, you must gather more. You must get more money. You must get more status. You must become more important. It's about more and bigger and higher. That's success. Jesus turned everything around. He didn't say, ek het nou so 'n nuwe boekie uit hierdie enetjie. That he said, he didn't say to children grow up as we used to do. He says to adults become small, grow down. Hy sê nie vir groot mense, kinders word groot nie, hy sê vir kinders, hy sê nie vir kinders word groot nie, hy sê vir groot mense word klein, nee. And one of the interesting things is with Jesus, is he turns this thing around. Waar as dit so werk dat jy altyd nog iets by mekaar moet maak, nog iets moet kry, dan dink die werknemer dink as ek net eendag die baas is. Die baas dink as ek net eendag die eienaar is. Wie wat doen die eienaar van die besigheid? As ek net eendag nog meer besig is. Die student dink as ek net eendag my graad het, dan kan die Here my. En so dink almal skuif na die goalpost. As ek net genoeg status het, as ek net genoeg geld het, as ek net genoeg ryk genoeg is, genoeg materiële goed, dan gaan die dinge gebeur. But Jesus turns it around. If you read the 4 Gospels, you see one of the trends is that nearly every time when somebody wanted to follow Jesus, they had to let something go. Ons het altyd gesê, as jy Jesus wil volg, moet jy net hierdie gebed bid. En dit het vir my gewerk, dis hoe ek 'n volgeling van Jesus word. So ek dink is nie verkeerd nie. But if Jesus said to the rich young man, just pray this prayer, most probably he would have done it. That's one of the scariest things for me. Yes. So iets is wat jy kan stel. When you wanted to follow Jesus, if you say, I dare you to do a study, not what says good theology about what must you do if you follow Jesus, but take the 4 Gospels and see what did he answer when people came to him and said, I want to follow you. Hy sê, jakkals het gate, voëls het neste, maar die seun van die mens nie 'n plek om sy kop nie. Sê hy vir die een. For the rich young man, he says, sell your stuff and give it to the poor. The disciples, when they follow him, what's the first thing that they do? They let go of their nets. And in the end of John, they take it up again, actually, but then they let it go again. Zacchaeus, the hooftollenaar, first thing he says, I mean, that's a bad guy that decides to follow Jesus. Some of the worst, die hooftollenaar. Oupa het altyd gesê, die joiners, jy weet, in boere. Dis hoe hulle gedaan. Hooftollenaar. But when he comes to Jesus, and Jesus says, I'm going to come to your house, and he repents, what does he say? First thing he says, I'm going to pay everybody twice back what I owe them. I'm going to let go of half of my money. He just tells of what he's going to let go. It's such a trend right through the Gospels that if you want revival in your life, most probably you're going to have to let something go, not get one thing more. Yes. And have to learn to let go. You know, Paul, he tells in Philippians and in 2 Corinthians, many places, he tells of how he had to let go of his status as an important Pharisee when he wanted to follow Jesus. Ons het altyd vir die kinders dan kampe, as het so afpak kan, dan quote is daai versie, ek maak my los van wat agter is en ek strek my uit na wat voor is. And then we would talk about how you have to let go of your pain and your hardship and your scars and your bitterness and so on. But actually, if you read that verse, the thing that Paul says, I had to leave behind, ek maak myself los van wat agter is, ek trek my uit na wat voor is, was 'n klomp goeie goed. Dit was sy status, dit was sy belangrikheid, dit was, you had to let go of a lot of good things. And of course also, you have to let go of your bitterness. According to Jesus, if you want to follow him, you have to let go of your right to take revenge. You know, so often in our world today, people cry justice, but they mean revenge. You have to let go of your revenge. You have to let go of your bitterness. And at the end, it's really also to your benefit to do that. So the art of letting go. And these 5 things we're going to talk about, it's one thing if it's an exception, as it 'n uitsondering is. But you know what, your exceptions doesn't say really much about your character or about your life. As jy 'n beter lewe wil leef, as jy geestelik wil groei, het jy beter gewoontes nodig, nie beter uitsonderings. You know, when sometimes I would speak at a place and people will afterwards come and say, ja, ons het ook al een keer 'n kinderhuiskind gehelp, jy weet, op vakansie. Of ons het ook al 'n boemelaar, jy weet, 'n bietjie laat barra by ons, laat stort en vir hom 'n bietjie kos gegee een keer. Ons het ook al op 'n gebed en vaskamp gegaan, jy weet, daai tyd een keer. Ons was ook daarom al op 'n uitreik. Ek het altyd gedink, as die uitreik die uitsondering is van die gemeente, wat is die reël, wat is die gewoonte? It's not your exceptions, it's not dis nie jou uitsonderings, die goedjie wat jy ook al een keer gedoen het. Jy kon ook 'n groot les geleer het, dit kan vir jou 'n beautiful moment gewees het, maar die ding wat jou lewe verander, is nie jou uitsonderings, dis jou gewoontes, die goed wat jy meeste van die tyd doen. Your habit says a lot about your character. It's like and it doesn't come easy, these things for us. It's like the guy who said, he meets his pal in the street and he says to him, you know what, you lied to me. He says, why? How can you say that? I'm your friend. He said, you told me if I want to be fit and I want to have a six-pack and muscles, I must go to the gym. And you know what? I did it. I went 3 times now. Nothing changed. Wat sal sy vriend sê? Hey, stupid man. Ja, jy doen dit met 'n uitsondering, gaan jy gym toe 3 keer nie. Dit gaan niks verander. Dit gaan verander as jy dit gereeld doen. As jy 3 keer 'n week, 3 maande dit doen, dan gaan jy 'n klein bietjie verandering begin sien. And I think a lot of these spiritual disciplines, we say it doesn't work or it's not for me, but you've tried it a few times. Jy's op 'n kamp en dan werk it. Okay, so let me quickly go through the 5 of these habits, and I'm going to give you a few thoughts on every one of them. So maybe I'll go through just quickly through the 5, just name them, and then I think we'll go through the first one, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll take the last 4. Okay. So the first one is taking time out in prayer. It's a habit that the early church had, it's a habit that Jesus had, it's a habit that everybody through the ages had this habit to go into a lonely place and take out time in prayer as a habit, not as an exception. The second one is to live unselfishly, to travel light materially with money, and that's quite a theme, I tell you. That's normally, I've had it so many times. I met a bunch of very rich women. They did a Bible study on this book at a wedding on an island in Mozambique. And the one lady said to me, there's some of these ladies, when they reached, because the one about money is the second chapter, when they reached that, they said, no, we don't want to continue with this. I thought, it's a hot topic. I tell you, Jesus' ideas about money and material possessions was wild. But the first one is taking time out in prayer. The second habit of a follower of Jesus is travel light financially and materially, living unselfish. The third one is to live in community, a rediscovered community. The church is not an organization that hosts spiritual events. We're a community that share our lives. The fourth one is to be good to your enemies. I mean, that's a tough one, like the financial one. To be good to your enemies, it's in the core of the gospel. Paul says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil by doing good. Om goed te wees vir jou vyande, nie sleg te wees soos hulle nie. That's a tough one. And the fifth habit is to care for this world. That followers of Jesus, the Jesus movement wasn't all about themselves. They weren't trying to save Christianity. That's a big trend these days. Ons moet net opstaan vir die Christendom. No, they were giving their lives to a broken world. Giving their lives. The church is at her best. The Bible, they speak about the church as a woman. Someone once, I wrote for a long time for the Beeld and some newspapers and magazines, and they would talk about the church and the women, I'd say her, and then the guy would say, you liberal, jy weet jou liptaart. Nou sit weer sy en haar en so on. Then I said, listen, Paul says the bride of Jesus, normally as we talk about the earth in the feminine, we talk about the church in the feminine. The church is at her best, not when she tries to flourish, but when she's willing to give herself to this broken world, as Jesus did. And we should ask more questions on how can we give our lives to the issues of our time, rather than how can we flourish and survive and so on. Jesus changed the world, not by winning, but by losing. And he shows us that. And in Easter, it's a good time to remember that. Jesus showed us on the cross, and that's my sermon tomorrow. I must preach. It's very much in my mind now. But he showed us how to. He wanted to show. Jesus died on the cross so that there will be life after death, but also so that there will be life before death. En dan Jesus sê, ek kom julle lewe oorgevloed te gee. Ek bedoel hy nie eendag as julle dood is nie. Yes. And he came also to show us how to change this world. How do you change this world? And according to Jesus, you want to change this world. Rather be willing to experience pain than to cause pain. That's what he did on the cross. It's radical stuff. Okay, so you have these 5. Tyd, afsondering, gebed. Reis lig. Leef in gemeenskap. Wees goed vir jou vyande. Gee om vir die wêreld. Okay? Christians aren't only people who talk about Jesus and sing how he gave his life. There are also people giving their lives to the world. Because they're followers of Jesus. They're not just talkers or they're not just fans of Jesus. They're followers of Jesus. So they try to do the things that he did. So let me talk about prayer, and then we'll take that break. So they had this, you just open it, no Afrikaans and notes, so the church, right through the ages, people who follow Jesus, and the early church, and I'm fascinated by it, is how did they grow from a few thousand to 20 million in such a short time, and in a world where they were not allowed to speak publicly, everything was against them. Oom sê een keer, hy wil hê ons moet kerk wees in 'n gunstige tyd. Sê ek, ja oom, hy wil, en hy sê ons moet weer kerk wees soos in die ou dae. Dus ek stem saam, ons verskil net oor hoe ver ons moet teruggaan. Hy wil teruggaan na die 80s toe. Ek sê ons moet teruggaan na die vorige kerk toe. Maar hulle het verskriklik baie reg gekry met vreeslik min. En die vraag was, wat is hulle geheime? En een van hulle geheime was, one of their secrets was that they took out time in prayer. Go read the church fathers, go read it, all these people, it's just amazing. What a trend it is to take time out in prayer and have that discipline in your life. And we get it, of course, from Jesus. It says there in Luke 4, verse 42, Jesus, daar staan, ten dagbreek het Jesus uitgegaan na een plek te vertrek. Lukas 6 staan, aan daai tyd het Jesus uitgegaan na die berg toe om te bid, en die hele nag 'n gebed deurgebring. Dan staan daar, nadat hy die mense weggestuur het, het hy alleen na die berg toe gegaan om te bid, en toe dit antwoord, was hy alleen daar. En so kan ons aangaan. You can just keep on reading verses of where Jesus spent the night on the mountain in prayer. He spent the night alone in the field in prayer. Over and over, it was a habit that he had. And if Jesus needed it, we need it more. We need it more in our time with all the noise and the information that's clouding our minds. We need to go into a silent place. En hy net so mooi nou ietsie daaroor gesê. Saturday was that silent place. One of the mystics talks of the dark night of the soul. We need to enter into that place. And it's interesting, often they would call it a lonely place. So it's a lonely place. It doesn't always feel that wonderful. Dis soos ou ek by gym, daai eerste ruk wat jy moet begin gym, dis nie lekker nie. If it was fun, everybody would do it. A discipline, that's the definition of a discipline, is to do something that is good and right, and continue doing it even when you don't feel like it. Ek sien nou by ons om stil te wees en in afsondering te wees, is een van die grootste strawe. Is een van daai laities by ons in ons hoërskoolhuis, as jy na die ergste strawe wat jy kan gee. Is om te sê met in jou kamer sit sonder 'n selfoon, geen elektroniese device om inligting van buite af in te kry. Jy weet, dan kry begin later 'n snaakse twitch kry na so 'n uur. Jy weet, hy raak van sy kop af na 2 ure. Hy kan net nie. Ons is so inligting verslaaf en geraas verslaaf. And I think we need that discipline. It's interesting that not only do we often read that Jesus took our time in prayer, we also see that all the great events in Jesus' life, according to the Synoptic Gospels, just after he was baptized, he goes into the desert for 40 days. I mean, praat van afsondering en gebed. Just before Jesus is crucified, just before Easter. What does he do? He goes into the Garden of Gethsemane and he goes to pray the whole night. And I think this world would be a better place if everybody that calls themselves a follower of Jesus would go into silence, into isolation somewhere, and really spend some time in prayer and with God before you make that big decision. So Jesus did it. It was his habit. We're supposed to do it also. And I think the problem sometimes with us is it feels empty, it feels quiet. We sang it in one of these songs. It was so beautiful. I think it was that second or third song. That sometimes he says, I don't have words now, Lord. My words are finished. There's an interesting priest, and I read a lot of his stuff these days, Ron Rolheiser. He tells this story. He says his mother was in a care home, care facility, and the year before she died, he was living close enough to her that he could check in just about every day. He would go to her room, she would lie there on the bed, and they would spend time together. And he said in the beginning it was good, there was a lot to talk about. It was easy. He said, but as time continues, you've said everything. You've said the same thing so many times. You've told the same story so many times. There's maybe something new that happened. He could tell her, or they would remember a new thing or whatever. He says, but to be honest, so often there was nothing to say. We said the same things. It was just like repeating stuff. And he said, sometimes he must confess, every now and then he looked at his watch. But he had to see the time through, and he was just sitting there at the bed. He said, but he's so thankful that he could do it that year, because he learned a big lesson also about prayer. He said it is the most important thing that year that built an invisible bond between him and his mom that cannot be explained in words, and that he appreciates, he has such gratitude to God today that he had that year with his mom. He said that spiritual bond did not grow because of the words, the inhoud, the content of the words necessarily. He said the most important thing is to show up. The most important thing is to show up, and the fact that he showed up even when he didn't feel like it. He showed up even when they didn't have words. They showed up when there's nothing new to say. He showed up when he was in a hurry to do other things, but he kept on showing up. And he said that's the most important thing in prayer also. Sometimes you feel you have a lot of joy, you've got something really, you really feel it. Sometimes you don't feel it. And I found that I need quiet time the most when I don't feel like it. Ek het 'n afsondering nodig, en ek nogal radical afsondering sal gehad. I'll tell you with one of the next things that I've got my sabbatical coming up, and I'm plotting a river there in Transkei where no people can go. You can't get there with a car, only with a kayak. But I found that I needed sometimes that discipline of going away and really just isolate yourself, spend time in prayer. I need it the most when I feel the least like it. And the important thing is to be there, to do it, to show up, because otherwise it's not a habit. Even when there's nothing new to say. Because and next time maybe there is something to say. Maybe next time you do experience something. And there's a lot of emphasis and talk about silence and isolation and contemplation these days. But people would go on a short retreat and they'd say, come back and say it doesn't work for me. And I think it's that gym thing. It doesn't work after the second time or the third time. Something starts working if you continue doing it after months. Dink 'n bietjie hoe sal jou lewe wees as jy 'n gewoonte het om elke dag tyd af te sonder jy kan albei hou. As jy 'n gewoonte het om elke nou en dan vir 'n rukkie weg te gaan in die natuur, of wat ook al dit vir jou moontlik is met waar jy nou in jou lewe is, maar om ordentlike genuine tyd te spandeer met God en so 'n bietjie God se stem in die natuur te hoor. Wat outomaties gebeur het vir Paulus, wat hulle het elke tweede aand langs die pad geslaap. Maar vir ons moet 'n bietjie effort insit. Maar jy weet jou lewe sal beter wees as jy dit sou doen. So, the other misconception about prayer is that like a guy said, die uit by sy pel gekom te sê, maar hy het deur 'n baie swaar ding, en ou kom sien my ook een keer so, hy sê, maar dit voel vir my of ek in die plafon vasbid. Ek sê van, miskien is dit die probleem, jy bid asof God bo kan die plafon is. Jesus het vir ons kom sê, hy is ook onder die plafon. Yes. En die ander ding is, hy probeer bid, hy probeer om 'n goeie, mooi gebed te bid. En hy kon nie, want dit was nie opreg nie, hy was kwaad vir God, hy het stikkend gevoel, hy was hartseer, het 'n bietjie van sy geloof verloor. Nou, hierdie week met 'n ou gepraat, sy dogter is dood, paar jaar terug, sy 19 was. Daar is 'n worsteling. Jy weet, ek het, die Christen literatuur is vol dagstukkies, maar die Bybel is vol nagstukkies. En ek sê dit vir haar ou, ek sê, jy weet, gaan lees bietjie die nagstukkies. Daar's 'n boek, Klaagliedere, dis die boek se naam. En weet jy wat, Prediker is nog meer depressief as Klaagliedere. En jy weet, ons wil graag 'n lekker psalm kry om te lees. Jy weet, as ek voel so 'n bietjie 'n depro dag gaan, en maak ek weet nie of julle dit ook al gebeur het, dan sê, o Here, slaan die kindertjies se koppe teen die klippe stuk, en waar is U, o God, daar, dan dink ek, waar's Psalm 23? Ek soek nie hierdie depro psalm nie, want daar's almal verskriklike klaagliedere in die psalms. Weet die goed wat van die profete geskryf het, ek sê vir die ou, gaan hou stilte tyd, en gaan lees, maar voor jy nou weer bid, gaan lees bietjie 'n paar nagstukkies. En ek sê vir hom, dat jy net voel, jy hoef nie vir God allerlei mooi goed te sê, jy kan maar eerlik wees. En ek sê vir hom, en dan gaan jy, En jy begin as jy bid weer, dan sê jy vir God, Here, ek sukkel om te bid. Dan begin jy deur vir God te vertel hoe jy sukkel om te bid. Begin daar. Ek loop hom so ruk later. Hy sê vir my, ek sê, hoe gaan dit? Met die plafon. Hy sê, Jesus, Jaco, ek was nog besig om vir God te vertel hoe ek sukkel om te bid. Kom ek agter nou bid ek heel lekker. Jy weet, toe hy so by die 10de ure kom hoe hy sukkel om te bid. Kom agter hy sukkel eintlik. Hy het 'n klaaglied geskryf vir God sonder om skuldig te voel, want hy was Dawid in die grot waar daai donker psalms skryf. En hy het gevoel hy is deel van God se mense wat eerlik is met hulle Vader. En hy was die profeet in die put. En hy was Paulus in die tronk. En hy kon sy klaaglied skryf. So daar's nie 'n regte gebed nie. Daar's net 'n opregte gebed. En as ons nou baie tyd gehad het, ek nou 'n klomp storieetjies, mooi stories vertel oor bid. Maar ek dink, kom ek sê julle gou, net, kom ek doen dit. Dan gaan ons die ander goeders nou doen. Ek dink daar's 3 gebede wat ons te min het. Die eerste een is 'n gebed in stilte. As in Engels, nee. I think there's 3 prayers that we prayed not enough. The first prayer is the prayer in silence that I said something about. I've got a friend, he's a real hippie, he's got this 1979, 69 combi, you know, and he's got a peace sign in front. And on the side it says, Tannie moenie lag nie, jou dogter is hier. En blommetjies op en so. And once we were on an outreach, and me and him sit, it's a little camper, we sit in his combi under a tree, and he says, Jaco, you spoke about this discipline of silence. Normally I don't understand what you say, you know. Why is silence so important? And I got an idea and I showed her, I said, let's just be quiet, let's do it, let's see what happens. So awkward, there we sit with our coffee in this hippie combi under the tree, dead silence. But we hear a bird in the tree, and some other birds in another tree. And after a while I said to him, you know what? These birds were singing all along. They didn't start singing because we listened. They were singing anyway. You know, there's this theology. Oh, we worshipped and then God showed up. I said, with all respect, did God the Father say to the Holy Spirit, hold back? They haven't sang the song enough. They haven't cried yet. Wait till they cry. Go, show up. You know? No. I think sometimes the song opens our eyes, helps us to listen.
Yes.
And we have different spiritualities so that we suddenly realize something that has been there all along. The birds are singing anyway, but you might miss it if you don't get silent. And so often you would see that people hear something about God's will for their lives when they stop and seek it, when they listen, and they miss it when they're just busy and they don't attend. You know, they don't let the open. They don't give their attention. So something really amazing happens if you stop and listen. God is speaking in the most profound ways, but you're going to have to stop and listen. The second one, let me just say, this is a nice thing that Mother Teresa said. I lived in India for a while, and I volunteered there with Sisters of Mercy in Calcutta, so I checked out how these nuns work, and also in Varanasi later on. Sometimes people would say these horrible things about Mother Teresa, then I think, ja oom, jy weet, jy leef net vir jouself, leef 100% selfsugtig, gooi soos daai ryk man in Lazarus, die arm is, dan 'n paar krummels vir die arm, so jy troos jouself daarmee, wil hierdie vrou beledig. En as 'n boom regtig as sy vrugte geken word, sy het bietjie snaaks gepraat, but she really lived, she really chose to give her life to, like Jesus did for a broken world. Anyway, she once said, a journalist asked her, he said, so when you pray, what do you ask of God? So she said, you know what, most of the times you won't believe, but I don't ask anything, I just listen. And the journalist scratched his head, he said, no, if you just listen, what does God say to you then when you pray? She said, no, I don't know if you understand it, but I think he also most of the time just listens. And then she said, if you don't understand it, I can't explain. You know, that there's something that happens in silence, in being present. My pa het altyd gesê, 'n teken van goeie vriende is dat hulle kan stil wees sonder dat dit ongemaklik is. You can be aware of each other's presence, and it's not only in the noise. Now the second prayer we don't pray enough is the prayer, break my heart with what breaks yours. I've got this, I love Pink Floyd, and I listened to Comfortably Numb once, and I was driving, and I saw a street child, and I thought, man, wie gaan jy nog, jy weet jou wetter, wie gaan jy nog roof? Gaan jy dalk nog iemand verkrag? And I was just having this thought of what evil this young boy is going to do. And it felt as if God touched my heart, that He spoke to me in a very clear way. And I had this voice in my heart, julle laat hierdie kind, julle ry van die kerk af, honderde mense, duisende mense van my liggaam ry verby hom. En julle laat hom groot word, sonder my liefde. In 'n plek waar daar 'n kerk op elke hoek is. And he doesn't know my love. And you want to think of the cruel things he's going to do? You know what? There's a child of 10 years old on the street, but you don't see a street child anymore because you've become numb. Numbness is 'n eelt op jou hart. You don't feel it anymore. Jy het hard geword. God said it to his nation, to his people there in Ezekiel. They became hard because of what they happened to them under the Babylonians. And he said to them, you've become hard. He said, and one of his promises of restoring them is, I'll take your heart of stone, I'll give you a heart of flesh again. Yes. And we need that. We are judging people that we're supposed to love. Because it's easier to judge than to love. It makes you feel better about yourself. But Jesus says no. That love is the best communicated, not from a position of power, not from a position of security even. But love is the best communicated from vulnerability. That's what Jesus did. Liefde is geloofwaardig. I'm going to say that this wedding now. Love is believable. The message of love is believable. Not when you communicate it from a distance, from a safe space, but when you come so close to the person you say, I love you to, that person can hurt you. Sure. With Jesus, that they could kill you. And I think one of the problems why the church has such low impact today in our country is we play it safe too much. Ons is net te smart vir 'n stuk in die wêreld. So the last prayer, that prayer, breek my heart met wat U hart breek. And the last prayer that we don't pray enough, I met a guy. I'm going to try to tell the story in English. I've never told it in English. Let's see how it goes. He was a special forces guy, a Kufut of, I think he was a Kufut or one of those special forces places. When he came to the Lord, he saw himself as he's now in God's special forces. You know, he would pray, God, if he lived in a town, he would pray, God, if there's something you want to do in this town today and you don't get anybody to do it, ask me, I'll do it. Sure. So he would say, Here gebruik my. He would be in Checkers and in, he'd start to talk to people. He's not a nice guy to be around, you know. Hy sal in die lift wees. In the lift, normally it's so bit tense in the lift. It's bietjie ongemaklik. Almal kyk vir die dak and so. Not he would get everybody's attention and say, people, this lift is going off. But let's say the cable breaks. And the lift goes down. Are you going up or down? But he understood something about the kingdom of God. And he once, he told me this story. He said, Jaco, in that town where I stayed, the businessmen on fire for God, they had a prayer meeting every Wednesday night for their town. And they would just really, pray that God that God sal intree in hulle stad. He would do something in their town. And he said, and they invited me to join their prayer meeting, 15 of these businessmen. And I shared my testimony, and I said, they asked me to lead them in prayer. And I said, okay, I'll lead you in prayer. And he said, what do we pray for? And everybody, he had been talking earlier that night about it. They say, we should pray for Sarki. That's the social worker. She's like a true follower of Jesus in every way. She lives in a small flat. She gives everything for the broken children, for the elderly. She's got a feeding scheme. She's on fire for God. That's why she studied social work. And she wants to make a difference in this town. And she's given herself in so many ways. And her car is stolen. Yeah, I said, she had this old little Volla, broken down old car, lives in this little flat. And he says, can you believe it, they stole her Volla. And the other guy said, yeah, misdaad, ons moet vir crime, we must pray about crime also. Yeah. And they say, we must pray because now how she's going to get the food to the kids, and how she's going to help the elderly, and how she's going to do all this wonderful work she does. And he said, Jaco, you won't believe it, they just wanted to start praying for her. He stopped them. He said, listen. He said, let me teach you the first lesson about prayer. You must pray with expectancy, met verwachting bid. If you want to pray for something, you must expect something. He said, so what do we expect? That God will issue a call from heaven? Because then they must stand back. They thought, Dr. Mickey Box. I said, how many cars do we have here? He said, you won't believe it. Between those 15 businessmen, they've got 45 cars. Some of them have 4, some have 2, but it's quite a bunch of cars that they have. And he said to them, you know what, I'm going to teach you a prayer. I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm going to teach you a prayer, and I promise you that God's going to answer. And they thought, yeah, okay. I promise you, God's going to answer it tonight. He says, we're going to ask God, we must give Sarki a car. Let's pray. He says, I wasn't surprised. Maybe after 15 minutes or 20 minutes or so, one guy stood up. I knew God answered the prayer. Sarki, she was there in her flat that night, late at night. She was on her knees. En het het 'n klaaglied geskryf vir hom. She was saying, God, how am I going to get to these kids? God, don't you see what happens to me? I tried to follow you. She was in this dark space, this dark night of the soul. She lost her car. There was a knock at the door. And there was this guy, she'd never met him. And she thought, this time at night, she opened the door. He said, are you Sarki? She said, yes. He said, well, here's a car for you. God listened to your prayer. And he didn't take a selfie and, an ornsie for the missions thing or whatever. He just said, God heard your prayer, I'll send you the papers, this is your car. And she had to go out after he left to press the remote to see what car, and it was his good car. And I guess that Sarki that night went on her knees and she said, God, thank you that you answered my prayer. Jy sien, voordat ons moet ons baie keer net uitfigure wie werk vir wie. I think we're asking a lot of things from God that He's actually asking for us. I had to speak at Parijs with a klomp boere once. And I said, what do we pray? Nee, God moet ingryp in die. I said, what picture do you see? Gaan die arme mense so warm vas die broodjie kry wat so verskyn. Gaan die eensames net, gaan werksgeleenthede net verskyn. I said, maybe we are asking a lot of things from God that He's already entrusted into our hands and He's asking us to do. And maybe it's not God holding back some of the blessings. Miskien is een van die belangrikste goed as ons wil bid is om aan te meld vir diens. Someone once said, prayer is not in the first place a way of changing God's will, it's a way of finding God's will. Dis disciple taal. Dis Jesus taal. Say, yes, I want to. And let me end with this. We have 2 prayers that Jesus taught His disciples. The one is the Onse Vader, the Our Father. The second one is the harvest are plentiful and the laborers are few. He said to them, pray this prayer. The harvest are plentiful, the labourers are few. Pray that God will send harvesters. Bid vir meer mense wat sal help. And then they do it, of course. They bid, o Here, kyk hoe lyk dit in ons wêreld. Mag meer mense so saartjie wees, nee. Mag meer mense help. And you know what says the next passage starts with the words, Jesus sends the 12 out. On to melk vir diens. So the first one of these 5 habits is to set time out in prayer. The most important is to pitch, to show up.